In the last video, we put together our language store component. The next thing we're going to do is import this into our app component and render the language store itself. By rendering the language store, we're not actually putting anything on the screen. We're just implementing the context object inside of here and making the current state and the ability to change it available to other components inside of our component hierarchy. So I'm going to change on over to my app.js file. I'm going to find the current import statement that we have for the language context right here. Rather than importing the context object, we want to import that component that we just created. We're going to show this component exactly one time inside of our application because we only want one copy of the currently selected language to be floating around our app. So inside of the app.js file, I'm going to change that import statement to curly braces, language store, like so. Remember, we are using the curly braces here because we are trying to import a named export value. So there is no export default here. It just says export, which means to import it, we have to use those curly braces and then list out the exact name of the variable that we're trying to import. So now inside of my render method, I'm going to find where we previously had language context. So we're no longer going to set up our provider inside of here because the app component is no longer responsible for maintaining our business logic or our application data. So I'm going to remove the provider. And instead, I'm going to wrap user create, or excuse me, I'm not going to wrap user create. We're going to actually implement this a little bit higher. I'm going to wrap everything inside that div with language store, like so. So you might be curious, why did I hesitate there? Well, I made a little bit of a mistake. Remember, we want both user create and the language selector component to have access to the data inside of our language store. User create wants to get the currently selected language. Language selector wants to get that callback function. It wants to get the ability to change the currently selected language. So that's why we have to wrap both the language selector and user create with this new language store component. Now we're going to continue to do a little bit more of a refactor to our app.js file. The app.js file is no longer in charge of maintaining the currently selected language. So we will remove the state initialization at the top. The app.js file no longer needs the ability to change the currently selected language, so we will remove that callback right there as well. And then finally, the language selector component is not going to get the ability to change the currently selected language from the app. Instead, the language selector is going to get this callback from our context object instead. So we can delete that prop right there because it's not going to get that callback from the app component anymore. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to flip back over to my browser really quickly, and you might notice that we have a little error message over here. I think I probably made a little typo. Yes, I did. So inside of the language store component, you'll notice we reference on language change right here. That was my mistake. It should be on language change, this dot on language change, like so. Okay, that should be better. Let's try saving this now. And now we can see our application running. Now, these buttons are not going to work, and if you click on them, you're going to see an error message. So we still have a little bit more work to do. So let's take a quick pause right here. In the next video, we're going to wire up our language selector component to that new context object, and that's when you'll start to get a better idea of what's going on here. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.